My name is Andrew Petiprin. I'm Fellow of Popular Culture at the Word on Fire Institute. My mother was an English teacher, and so she instilled in us, by the books that she read, a strong literary imagination that was an essential part of our faith. And so that meant especially authors like C.S. Lewis and the Chronicles of Narnia and J.R.R. Tolkien, The Lord of the Rings, but lots of other stuff as well. From our earliest childhood memories, we were memorizing not only Bible verses, but also poems like If by Rudyard Kipling and various other things like that. And it really opened up our minds and our hearts to a reality that was deeper than just what we could see. When I thought of God as a kid, I thought of his creation in terms of the books and movies and stories that I knew. So when I thought about the creation narrative, I thought about the creation of Narnia. Or when I thought about even just the images of God, I would think of Aslan. I would think of figures in stories that we were reading. Beauty has been important to me from early on in my life, and I would say that engaging with beautiful things, books and films in particular, definitely paved the way for me to want from religion a certain high quality aesthetic. When I was a kid, religion was relatively beautiful, I would say. We went to Methodist churches and we sang Wesley hymns, which are fantastic and beautiful. We then drifted later into a more contemporary worship experience in a non-denominational church. And there is where I really began to long for something that felt more stable, for one thing, but also kind of more beautiful. Something that was clearly from somewhere and therefore had a kind of destiny, something that could be engaged with over the long haul. In 2001, I moved to England to start graduate studies. And anybody who's been to England, and especially to Oxford, where I was living, knows that the place is just kind of saturated with history. It feels old. Everywhere you go is a place where lots of great minds have thought great thoughts, and where beautiful things have been built to last forever, maybe. And I sought out my college chapel in particular. I sought it out because I was thinking of the lines of T.S. Eliot, that it was my vocation, in a way, to pray where prayer had been valid, that I had experienced a lot of things in Christian churches that didn't feel like it was connected aesthetically or spiritually to anything deeper than itself. I was led to the Anglican Church because I had longed for a considerable amount of time for an expression of Christianity that was beautiful and felt old, that was connected to something bigger than just one person in one building. And so when I arrived in England, I was able to worship in an ancient space, and I was able to worship with liturgy that had been used for many, many generations over a test of time, and it felt more trustworthy. When I became an Anglican, I immediately started thinking about the question of a vocation. And a lot of things that I had been wrestling with throughout my life really came to the fore. Was I not only called to be a part of this old feeling, beautiful tradition, but whether I also was called to lead in that context. And so as soon as I had become an Anglican, I pretty much started talking to my priest about whether I might be called to the same life. And a lot happened after that. I ended up moving back to the United States and did a bunch of other things, but ultimately I felt like that was what the Lord was calling me to do at that period in my life. I hadn't been an Episcopal priest for very long when I really began to struggle, but not so much in a negative way, but just to really begin to pray and think seriously about whether I was called to remain an Anglican or was called into full communion with the Catholic Church. But that took several years to work through. I was ministering to a congregation, and so they demanded a lot of my time and energy, and it wasn't always possible for me to focus on myself and my own spiritual needs and concerns. But eventually, it became very clear to me that the future for me and for my family was as full members of the Catholic Church. As an Anglican, I was very much a high churchman. I was an Anglo-Catholic, and I believed to some degree in something like a branch theory, that as an Anglican, it was possible actually to be a real Catholic, and that being a Roman Catholic was one way to be a Catholic, but being an Eastern Orthodox Christian or an Anglican might be another way. But that we, because of our divisions, also had a ways to go as Anglicans, that we needed to Catholicize our branch more and more to come closer and closer to that fullness of communion with the Catholic Church. Eventually, I came to believe that if we were a branch of the true church, that we had indeed been fully severed from the tree. And that was a hard realization for me to come to, but it also led me to deeper reflection on what I was. And again, the Catholic Church helped me a lot in this respect by saying to me, you're not nothing. What you've done has been extremely valuable and has been a blessing to many people. You've been giving your people some kind of manna. You've been nourishing them in some way, and you've been nourished in some way. But that there's an even bigger reality, that there's an even bigger world that is calling you into it now. And eventually that vision became completely irresistible. I had left my congregation, my Episcopal congregation in Florida, and went to work on a diocesan staff in Tennessee. So I didn't have my own congregation anymore. I was doing more of an administrative job, although I still had some liturgical responsibilities. But around that time, two big things happened in my life. The first was I was working on a book called Truth Matters, and trying to write a book about truth and about how God has revealed himself to the world led me further and further down the path of understanding that the fullness of that expression was in the Catholic Church. At the same time, I was participating in an ecumenical reading group with a group of Catholics and some other Anglicans, but the Catholics were just incredibly welcoming and brilliant. We were reading these ecumenical documents together, including Pope St. John Paul II's Ut Unum Sint, and it was just very clear to me that the welcome from the Catholic Church was a welcome home, while at the same time strongly identifying what I already was doing as something that was a gift that could be brought into the church. My family and I finally came into the Catholic Church on January 1st, 2019, the Feast of Mary, Mother of God. It was a wonderful occasion, and my wife and my two children and I were all able to be received, confirmed, and receive our first communion together on the same day.